Hey, it's your boy. Hey, Wai Guo means black foreigner in Chinese. I've been in China for over a year now, since before the pandemic began. Still feel safer here than if I'd gone back home, and I'm glad I made the decision to stay here. Uh, all right, there's a lot to talk about since haven't been on here since maybe last over 9 months, according to my computer. I've not been online. I haven't made a video. So there's been a lot of things since the election that have been on my mind and I find interesting or want to talk about. But for the time being, I think now the best time and most important focus would be to talk about the uptick in violence against Asian Americans and against the Asian American community and Asian American elders, uh, and violence in general related to the pandemic, of course, but especially this because it seems to be trending and the doesn't seem to be going away as or abating as quickly as we would like it to be. Uh, it's very frustrating for the situation because these are two different communities. If you look at the black community and Asian community, not to mention just like in relationship to all other communities of people, because unfortunately, the United States is set up in many ways along race lines as well as other categorizations that they put people into, and people are basically like grouped and have like different social dynamics with each other. I made an entire list here to go through this because I want to I'm trying not to drag this video out longer than is absolutely necessary because I know people have short attention spans. So first and foremost, I'll just get to that. I condemn, of course, I condemn the violence against Asian Americans, Asian American elders, the Asian American community, uh, and just undue and unnecessary violence. Uh, I'm going to get into why. There's I think I understand a lot of misperceptions on both sides for Asian Americans and Black people in general, uh, and overarchingly within the group of all groups of people. But I'm gonna do my best to break this down. Firstly, though, just want to make sure clear, it's wrong. I condemn it. It is not cool. It's super not cool. I'm somebody. The shirt over there, I proudly put on display, is my shirt from my being a member of the Chinese Students Association at UCI, my university. I've been a part of a bunch of different Asian related groups and organizations back home, and I feel a sense of kinship and reverence for Asian American history, culture, like all that. In addition to my own culture and that of many others. And so I'm trying to believe, I really want to try and bring up the importance of forging solidarity in order to, and the necessity of forging solidarity in order to resolve like social issues and to move society in a more progressive direction. Because otherwise, we're gonna just end up being at odds with each other for like stupid reasons often. So let's get into that. First, want to touch on this. The anti-Asian violence is the uptick started happening. I did a tiny bit of research. I've passively paid attention to this stuff for a while, but I had to do a quick review, a reference. I saw an uptick, like there was an uptick in it around when the pandemic began, basically. So a lot of people under the President Trump, who claimed the virus was basically from China and was he's the one who basically made the social widespread association of Asian Americans with a virus, and then the economic like hardship that followed in relationship to the virus and his failures, which he does not acknowledge even to this day, uh, are basically like they're left for Asian Americans to have to deal with, and a lot of people have been misinformed and even maybe disinformed. People are actively willfully misinforming people about where the virus came from, why it, and how you as treating Asian American people as if they are the virus itself or that it's their fault. Like a virus is just fucking come into existence, all right? It's not Asian American people's fault. If anything, I was in China before the fucking virus took off, and they did near 3 month lockdown, probably more of a lockdown than most other countries, and definitely more than consistently was done in the United States. I've been paying attention. All right, now They're still doing a lot. But that being put aside, Asian Americans are not at fault for the virus. That's bullshit. uh, they should not have been associated with the virus. It should have been treated as a public health issue, because if you look at the people who are most likely to be spreading the virus in the United States, people who don't want to wear a mask, they aren't Asian Americans. Generally. All right, that being put aside, there's a lot of xenophobia. The United States has a ton of racism and a history of racism and xenophobia. Xenophobia is just the overarching umbrella, in my opinion, of which includes the category of racism, like unjust discrimination, racism. What racism is, like discrimination based upon your race and like racial origin, which is all race is kind of just a social construct anyway. But I'll get into that another time. But yeah, racism is under the bigger umbrella of xenophobia. You just don't like people who are different from yourself, and not for like logical reasons of them being not based upon their like beliefs, the merit of their beliefs, or the truth of their beliefs, or falsehood of their beliefs. Just you don't like tend to like people is what xenophobia is, that are not of your group. It's a sort of tribalism kind of thing. So the United States has a lot of that. This has happened. Like there's like waves of this for Asian Americans, all groups of people probably in general. Like Middle Eastern people have gotten it in waves. Black people consistently get in waves. We get lots of we get fucking tidal waves. I gotta stop cursing. But yeah, the most recent one now is this with the virus. And right now, actually, black people are also affected by the like negative implications of what's happened, like the economic fallout from the virus itself. Like a lot of the shit is like, but there's a great deal of ignorance and misinformation going on. So I'm going to do my best to try and break down what I see as like happening from discussions I've had with people. Not 7 minutes. I'll try and hurry up. All right. So I'm going to break this into two categories. First category, we're going to use Asian Americans. Second category, we're going to use like Black Americans. And these are Black Americans who are not from Africa, or like not immigrated from Africa. There's going to be explained later. The abridged version of this is, and these two categories of racial or identity, there are bad actors, and they fuck it up for everybody. I gotta stop cursing. They mess it up for everyone. So I'm gonna start with the discussions I've had with Asian Americans first, so it's understood that I'm not being I'm not going to try and make one bigger than the other. For Asian Americans, there are genuinely like Asian Americans I know that are like sincere in solidarity. They're constantly like, I've worked with some amazing Asian Americans and in Asian American orgs, ranging from the Chinese American Citizens Alliance to UCI's Chinese Association, and like the Cambodian Americans organization. I've been on part of a lot of organizations. So in these, we've had like inter-race and intercultural dialogues, and even inter-religion dialogues at times. And we've also reviewed a lot of the history. The education on these things is vital in order for people to understand why it is a problem to demonize a whole other group. I've been seeing some of the Asian Americans that I consider bad actors encouraging their primary solution is oriented in terms of a sort of, these people don't like us and we didn't like them anyway and we should get guns. This is my distilling of their argument for the sake of speed. They think guns are going to solve the problems. And I also noticed there seems to be a correlation, a very strong correlation between conservatism that they hold, their conservative like in relationship to Donald Trump and relationship to like what's Republicans are now, that kind of conservatism, and their love of like guns as a solution for a social problem of, and like a complicated social problem of involving violence. But the violence alone is not going to resolve. It will only add gasoline to a fire of social problems. So there's Asian Americans who sincerely understand and are educated on the issue, and there are Asian Americans who I think usually are conservatives, who are like aligned with Trump supporters oftentimes. Not always. There's maybe just old school Republicans, which are also still kind of bad in my opinion. But a lot of the conservative ones are usually like a little more religious and also very pro-gun. And I've also noted a lot of anti-blackness primarily from this subset. Unfortunately, there are some, like, anti-blackness is kind of like a thing that happens across, like, everybody kind of engages in it. And this can happen even in innocent circumstances. Like, I've seen people, like, not intentionally advancing an anti-black argument or attitude, but, like, kind of implicitly doing so. So I do my best to be conscious of these things, and I try not to do it myself if possible. But I'm going to focus on the people who are conscious, like, more or less. It doesn't matter whether they're doing it on purpose or not. They're just doing it a lot. And the conservative Asian Americans I come across tend to very gravitate towards this attitude. Non-heavily conservative Asian Americans tend not to. They tend towards solidarity a little bit more, and they're a little bit more focused on what else can we do beyond, like, engage in violence back. And again, engage in violence back against an entire group of people makes, like, very little sense because it's only specific people who really have done any significant harm. And furthermore, these will be broken down into class afterwards. But for right now, we're just on political orientation. Asian Americans, more conservative, more not conservative. And there's, like, centrist Asian Americans. I would say, like, Andrew Yang is a like, liberal or centrist Asian American. I prefer to term anybody left of that as as progressive Asian American. If you're left of Andrew Yang, if you were right of Andrew Yang, then you were probably not very you're probably conservative, like, for practical reasons here. I can go in this at length another time. Then I will skip over to who I consider to be bad actors within my own community, black people. Black Americans, there's a lot of things working against Black Americans to have the sense of solidarity and understanding of what's going on. Although many of them do actually, a lot of them understand, at least at the surface level, the relationship and have a camaraderie with Asian Americans. Like, there is, like, overlapping. Like, if you have, remember, even pop culture, you have, like, Rush Hour and, like, Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly, and, like, there's a relationship, like, for a long time between the Black community and Asian Americans. Even going far back as, like, the Black Panthers and the Yellow Peril movement. But these were all, again, more leftward, like, types of people, more leftward thinking, I think. And left in terms of, like, collectivism and unity, like, solidarity. We work together. We're in this together. Whereas a lot of the conservatives were like, we're in this together, which usually means they think in terms of the Asian community as a whole, like, we're in this together, rather than let's all be in this together kind of thing. They also tend to, like, pick out individual Black people. They think, like, well, this Black person's cool, but like, most of them not so great. I'm jumping back to this. Let me go back to the Black Americans. And so, touching on what issues I've noted within the Black community is there is a lack of education. It's harder for them to be able to achieve that solidarity if they don't feel, or they're in a community where they feel like the model minority myth is being played up. And the model minority myth is essentially that certain group of minority, like a minority racial group, is treated as more like as a better or superior at integrating into the overarching group, in this case America, right? So they're better at assimilating, and they use them often to, like, as a weapon against, like, socially to criticize Black Americans. Like, well, these guys are doing great, why aren't you doing great? Which is, if you know the history and you know the, like, social circumstances, you understand it's BS. Of course, if you know Jim Crow, redlining, just, like, police brutality, just, like, there's been an entire war upon the Black community, and it's like all communities get it, but black Americans, also Native Americans, I think, get a lot of it. And unfortunately, for many Asian Americans, they're, especially the conservative ones, they either don't know or don't care. Or for Asian Americans in general, many of them know, and the ones I'm usually interact with, like from the Chinese Association or like KRC, Korean Resource Center, they understand. But there are conservative types who have been kind of like brainwashed, more or less, to see black people as their enemy, and they're like posting pictures of like when the LA riots happened, when Korean people were on top of their houses or like their stores, and they were shooting out people who were rioting out of injustice, essentially. Because like, and I think the framework of the LA riots actually is a good microcosm of what was going on more at the macro level for America over time. You have two groups of minorities. One is treated a little bit more nicely than the other, or I mean, maybe a lot. You can argue, depends. But regardless, one's treated as the like the good minority, and one's treated as the not good or like bad minority, and they're just like as a general group. This is inherently bad for a lot of reasons. It creates a division and animosity. We become enemies of each other because we're treated as like, well, why are they getting like treated much more nicely? And we've done a lot. We've been here just as long as anybody else. We've done all these things for the community. Our ancestors were abused to make this country great, and so forth. It's frustrating because it's like a really complicated social thing to have to break down. But if you look at the history and social, I have to do a whole other video. I'm running out of time. And just there's for Black Americans, there's a lack of education on the history for all people in general. Just lack of education on the history and understanding of the social dynamics. But basically, they pit people against each other, the two groups against each other. Asians were always treated generally as a model minority. Same for Jewish people, as after a certain point in time. And this was not always the case, but eventually, it, over time, became the case. And it's a myth because, in actuality, if you want to go across, like compare notes, there are actually a lot of Asian Americans who don't hold to the stereotype of the model minority myth. And that myth actually handicaps many of the Asian Americans who are not falling into that category, such as Laotians, Pacific Islanders, like Samoans, Cambodian people. Like a lot of them come from like socially like disadvantaged groups and not like super affluent like or like strong support network there, right? And this is speaking just generally. Many of the people who came over from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and so forth were probably for like due to refugee reasons or like the wars that were going on due to the United States. So ironically, a lot of those people also became conservative because they viewed like the conservatives have positioned themselves as anti-communist. So they were it's a fucking mess. So yeah, Black Americans. There are Black Americans who are economically strong, and there are Black Americans who are impoverished and struggling or working poor. A lot of the working poor have consistently done their best to integrate and follow the rules and like the best they're able to, given the limited resources and access to opportunities that they have, and also society's prejudice against them. And then they look at their neighbors and they seem to be doing better, and they're like, why am I not getting this treatment? And so this is maybe one of the reasons for divide there. But ironically enough, if you look at both groups, conservative Asian Americans care about the group of Asian Americans as a whole, insofar, from what I can tell, insofar that it benefits them individually. So as long as they are able to perpetuate basically their capitalist status, their class, they're happy with it. They're like, cool, because they view themselves as like honorary white people in a way. And it's kind of the case. Like, there's not many better ways to say that, and I feel like it's necessary to say it that way to kind of like juxtapose them with white supremacy, because a lot of them identify with a lot of the same like attitudes and anti-blackness that you see from white supremacists about Black people, and sometimes also Hispanics and other people as well, like people from just like not Asian or European descent. And it's abhorrent. Really, it's just really sad. Uh, a lot of them I've talked to do not want to acknowledge this, at least not openly. But I've had some pretty at length discussions with people, and I can kind of tell when they're being like disingenuous. So yeah, the conservative Asian Americans I've come across don't really, in actuality, and this has happened with the Harvard admissions thing as well. When they were trying to attack affirmative action, there's usually the conservative Asian Americans are like, "Why can't my kids get into the college? Why are you letting these black people get in?" And da da da. It's like it becomes really like toxic and xenophobic really quick. So that moved like away from the conservative Asian Americans. There are everybody who's not those people tend to understand and like have a sense of solidarity with the black community and maybe have a healthier understanding of like their plight and sense of like we should help each other out and maybe make the rules more equitable so like they have a chance too. Uh, Ideally, the problem in capitalism, because I have to ultimately comes down to class as well, is that it's set up so there's a hierarchy. So it's like going to be they want the division between rich and poor. And they believe like there's like in their mind there's like a warped sense of meritocracy and like privilege that they've earned or deserve for whatever reasons more so than another group of people, and it's horrible. But affluent black Americans, many of them also identify with conservatism, and they might as well in a lot of ways be grouped with the Asian American conservatives. I would argue that like if I want to pick at this point, Kanye West, I think I just might as well be grouped with it. Kanye is kind of crazy, but like at this point, I'm like he belongs to them now. Ben Carson is another one. Uh, like many of the staunchly black conservatives tend to be of the same values as conservative Asian Americans, in that like they think they can adopt or inherit like an honorary whiteness of sorts. That's how I'm going to frame it anyway. So it's like it's easier to juxtapose with white supremacy because the values and attitudes are similar enough, in my opinion, that they should be compared. Uh, for non-conservative, uh, and I have to go and define conservative at some point as well. Conservative for these groups of people, and in general, when I make this reference, it's usually people who are very pro-capitalist, uh, want like are okay with a division, like an expanding divide between rich and poor, feel that people who are poor deserve to be in their place, and that they just have to work harder because that's how life works. Like there's a lot of neoliberals are kind of basically like sort of conservative as well, but basically, yeah, that group of people I meet this many people holding these attitudes of many different colors, but they work against the black community by also kind of like doing an internal like attack on their own community, and then Asian American conservatives also attack the black community, uh, and almost as in a way to like make themselves like look better, and it's very abhorrent. Then, if you're going to go further in, there's another divide that happens within the black community between black Americans and immigrated Africans or black people from other countries that have immigrated to the United States. And the most prominent example of this I've seen within the black community is the divide between maybe Ethiopians and like regular black Americans who are like born here and have generations of like the heritage from racism and stuff, like Jim Crow and slavery. Uh, that's a whole other video unto itself, but there's a divide there, and again, that group, which is actually from a fairly highly educated background and has a social and familial networks and whatnot, often uh, are pitted against black people who have been here for generations and have had like been under tyranny and socially by the government and also sometimes other communities. And usually, of course, when I say other communities, it's usually the bad actors. Though sometimes people who are generally nice or good people can kind of like get in jabs against the black community and like kind of embody a sort of anti-blackness. Now, all of that is to say, I'm going to come to the conclusion here. Oh my god, it's already 25 minutes. I have to go into the divide for Asians as well. Furthermore, last point for that. For within the Asian community, I noticed there's a divide as well between immigrated Asians and Asian Americans who were born here. I've noted this kind of among the younger generation especially, is that sometimes there will be like this sense of superiority to immigrated Asian Americans or immigrated Asians from other countries, that they'll like treat them like as if they're inferior, and so like they have like a desire to like distance themselves to prove their Americanness or something. And again, these are like entire videos unto themselves. But I wanted to just touch on these layers of division just a little bit so we can see them broken down. I wish I had like animation and like assistance to be able to put together the video beyond having to explain it verbally. Eventually, I hope to do that. But for now, I just want to be clear that there are bad actors on all sides, and it's important to be able to target when they're like who they are or what their general like MO is, and they're kind of like what they're insinuating their values and how it's toxic. It's hurt, like if it's basically demonizing the other group, and they're usually going to punch down is how it works. Whether you're an affluent black person who's from a conservative, there are affluent black people who are progressive. But if you're an affluent black person who's conservative, you're more than likely, whether you're conscious of it or not, punching down on the black community. And likewise, if you're an Asian American conservative, you're more than likely punching down on the black community. And so this creates an animosity that I think kind of became inflamed during the pandemic, and it was made worse by the misinformation and like framing of the pandemic as if it was the Asian American community's fault, which it's not. And it's not even like, none of this makes any sense, because the people who were wearing masks first were mostly Asian Americans. Like some of the people, and like Asian American people are more like known for having worn face masks before this pandemic even had occurred. Like it was normal because they had the SARS outbreak, and so it's like Asian Americans also tend to like take it very seriously because they understand like other people have been targeting them, and it's this unpleasant weight that they have on their shoulders to be like extra American, and that can sometimes also push them to alienate another group of people. For black people, there are again subdivisions of that, and the easiest subdivision right now I'm going to go with is there are poor black people who are maybe engaged in informal economy, which is crime basically, and they're also black Americans who are poor, but they're not engaged in crime or anything. And even within the criminals, I'd argue that there are like some criminals would probably have sense of like values that they shouldn't just go attack somebody's grandfather or grandmother. It's pretty toxic. But again, real like hardened criminals, no matter what color they are, and it's not just black people attacking, no matter what color they are going to lash out. And just like bad people of every color are going to behave badly. So it's a lot to take in and try and digest and break down. And I'm doing my best, given because I want to knock this out in one full video. I don't have the time to do the breakdown I would like to do for this. But this is this is how I conceptualize a lot of this, and I want to help other people see that there are bad actors on all sides, and you can target who. But the key here is, I want to get to the cure to the problem, is solidarity. There's solidarity, awareness, and vigilance of when you can see somebody targeting the community for irrational and xenophobic reasons. It's a lack of education, and education is the enemy of ignorance. So with solidarity. And then also I'd say there's a political dynamic to it, and it's necessary that we engage in politics to make sure that, like, whether it's like getting on Twitter and denouncing, like that's the littlest thing you can do, right? Get online and denounce like violence against Asian Americans because they're not the reason. There shouldn't be violence against them. They haven't done anything wrong to anybody. And it's getting online, communicating, getting the message out that this is wrong. One, two, do what you can to demonstrate a sense of solidarity. Solidarity takes work. It's like, it's not easy all the time because I know everybody's under like a lot of stress because of the pandemic and like lack of money and everything. But when we help each other and we forge the ties between communities, we create a more robust and strong community. And capitalism is not going to be like, capitalism makes that very difficult because we live in global capitalism and we live in a nation that is capitalist, like excessively capitalist, especially. But it's something that has to be done, and I believe it's necessary to work together so that we can throw off the dynamic of capitalist, like the ordering of society via capitalism, because capitalism's kind of set up to set us against each other in the first place. That's, again, I talked about in the previous video. I'll go into future videos about that. But yeah, so there's that. Little political actions. If you're able to do bigger political actions, like writing your senators, can we get a bill, or can we even like a local politician, can we get cameras and put in this location or that location, make sure people have a safer trip from A to B, or doing community watches. You can go, that's more of a direct action. You can join local Asian American organization and volunteer to offer, or just be like offer whatever financial support you can, if you can. Offer a little bit of like, hey, I can come in and watch. If you guys gonna do a watch, let me come through. I'll come join you, walk whatever precinct, and try and help deter violence that should not be happening, and help defuse hostile situations and that kind of thing. But the highest level, I think, is just sincerely trying to be there and put yourself and show people that you sincerely care about them. I think that's the highest solidarity you can get, is that people are willing to go out there and fight and defend you. At the same time, I understand this is difficult because there are people who are just horrible people in both communities, in all communities, unfortunately. But at the same time, the people who are good of all colors have to get better at working together so we can stop people who have a behavior or predisposition of like othering and alienation of people based upon like their inherent qualities, such as their race, their sex, their like national origin, and that kind of thing. It's irrational, one. And also it's ethically wrong. You would not want somebody to do that to you. So yeah, that's the limit on the video. Sorry, 33 minutes. These videos always take longer than I want them to. I'm so sorry, because I know people's attention spans are not the longest. And thank you if you've been able to make it through this entire video. I hope to be able to go into and polish these kind of things and do more with these videos. But for now, the best I can do is make them and get them out. So together, let's stand in solidarity, work together, look out for each other. If you see somebody treating somebody wrong, you do your best to support them in the safest way you're able to support them. If you're a brave person, by all means, intervene as well. But if you do what you can to help other people, because that's what solidarity is. They're your people, just like the people who look like you are your people. They're all your people. We're all each other's people, except for maybe the conservatives. They're not really like they're kind of selfish. So I don't really, not the biggest fan of that. But that's an ideology. That's like a different thing. You're not born a conservative. Okay, I'm gonna stop now. I hope to go into more of this and touch on this subject again later. But yeah, get out there, spread the word. I'm gonna leave a link to a Rolling Stones article that was connected to this for people to like look into and learn more about the issue. Yeah. Till then, till next time. Hopefully not 9 months from now. Namaste. And yeah, power to the people. Peace out.